Okay. Now we are going to discuss recruiting. And recruiting has kind of two parts. It has a logistical part, what's actually going to happen. And then you've got, again, kind of like a psychology part in regards to what are the qualities you're looking for, personality, things like that. So we're also going to talk a little bit about qualities of good coaches, which you guys have to work through this week also. So when you look at recruiting, the logistical part of recruiting, it depends on what level you're talking about, because technically recruiting is not something that happens except for in college. However, what I want you guys to realize is if you've chosen a high school sport or you've even chosen like a rec sport, there's still some aspect of recruiting. Like if you're doing a rec team, how are you going to get kids to come and play for your team? You know, are you going to use word of mouth? Are you going to promote yourself? Are you going, and that's not going to be near as detailed as the recruiting that we talk about in college. But there is some aspect of how are you going to get players to play for you in those youth sports and things like that. Even in youth sports, when you get into travel, you have that kind of same concept. When you have travel teams, like for volleyball, we have travel volleyball. It's a huge thing right now. And every year it's a big fiasco. Who are you going to play for? What club team are you going to go to? And the girls get into this big like frenzy about it. And so, or the boys too. And so you have to think about how are you going to get players to come play for you. And then even in high school now, it's not legal, but if you guys are probably out of high school soon enough that you know that it happens. When I was coaching the high school over the last, 7 years before I came here last year, I had numerous players leave my school because they were recruited by another school thinking that they would be able to win a state championship, but they wouldn't be able to win it with us. And, what's sad is if they would have stayed, we actually probably would have. But they didn't want to wait, that extra year of development time or whatever it was. I will say I never recruited anybody over to our team, and we ended up doing very well. So I think that said something about our program itself. But you have to be ready to deal with those things and understand. So for me personally, at the high school level, it's not legal, so I didn't do it. I didn't recruit players. If they happen to come for whatever reason, their friends are there or this or that, fine. We gave them a chance, an equal chance, just like everybody else. But that was my personal moral system in play. And I knew, unfortunately, that it was going to put us at a disadvantage and that it was going to be harder to beat, the team that was taking the best player from this school and the best player from this school and the best player from this school and getting them all to come over their sophomore or junior year and trying to build like this power team. And so I knew it was going to be hard to beat that. But I just couldn't bring myself to fall into that. So those are some of the things you need to think about. Now, when you talk about actual recruiting in college, a lot goes into it. But the biggest thing that I can tell you is know your boundaries, know your school, know what type of people would fit. Okay, so like I said before, I was at a Division II school, but it was a tiny town. There was one like blinking stoplight, I think, and there's no McDonald's. There's no, there's none of that. It's probably about a 15-20 minute drive to get to those places. And the school, very, very small, no football team, very Christian. It was Baptist, General Baptist. So very strict in regards to they couldn't have dances. They couldn't be in the opposite sex dorm rooms. No homosexuality. That was actually in their student handbook. So there was all these things that made it very, very strict in a very certain kind of environment. And so for me, when I went to recruit, the first thing was, I'm not going to get the players that are going D1. I'm not going to waste my time and my energy, okay? I'm not going to get the players that are going to a big D2 school. They're not going to come here, okay? So my personal philosophy was, I never recruited a student at that. I never recruited a player while I was there that didn't contact me first. And that was because of the particular environment I was in. Now, if I would have been at a bigger school, I probably definitely would have pursued more myself and tried to sell my school to them. You know, if I was a big D1 and I had these things to offer, and I would go after those big players and say, hey, this is why you should come here. But for me, because I knew there was all these little things, I waited till the players contacted me. And then I never recruited off of a video. I would watch the video, and if I saw potential and the person had contacted me, I would contact them back. I always watch them in person. So I would go watch them play at high school. I would go watch them play in a club tournament, or I would invite them onto campus to play. Because videos are edited. You can get the best play that they made every single time, but not the 45 bad plays that they did because they've been edited out. So there's all these things. So I chose to, I would only recruit kids that contacted me or that came through somebody that I knew. So somebody else that worked at the school said, hey, this is my cousin, you know, she's really good. And then I would go watch. And then if I was interested, then we would start that conversation. Recruiting was my favorite part. I absolutely loved it. And I recruited some really good players who ended up staying there, you know, even after I left, and they went to nationals their senior year. So that was exciting. But logistically, you need to think about some of that. And again, your budget that you've already made, there's going to be a chunk of that you would have to think about recruiting purposes. So, you know, if you're driving back and forth to high schools, are you just going to out of pocket that, or are you going to reimburse yourself? If you're going to fly to a tournament, you got to account for flight, hotels, things like that. Okay, so keep those things in mind. And then the big thing is, what are you looking for? And so you guys are going to talk a little bit about that in your assignment. Is it more important to you to get, you know, someone who's already developed that you don't have to manage very much? I always liked getting players that needed development because I wanted to teach them how to do it the right way. And so I would look for players with potential. I would look for players that had, you know, quick movement or quick reflexes, even if their footwork wasn't right, because I was like, I can teach them footwork. I would look for players that could jump or had athletic ability, even if they were mishitting the ball, because I'm like, I can teach them to hit the ball. You know, I can teach them how to block. I can teach them how to do an approach. But if they're jumping and their arms are this high above the net, that's something that I could probably use. And then the biggest thing for me was attitude. I did not want to deal with attitude problems. So what was that person's disposition on the court? You know, were they positive to their teammates? Were they yelling at their teammates? Were they a leader? Were they a follower? Were they, and I'm not saying you don't want followers because you can't have everybody be a leader, but were they vocal? Were they, did they get down on themselves every time they made a mistake, you know, or were they able to bounce back and handle the next play? Those types of things almost sometimes are just as important, if not more important, than the skill part. And then another aspect of that would be academics. Are you going to specifically recruit good students? You know, and if not, what's your standard going to be? Because, you know, a lot of times schools can get awards and things like that for GPA and this and that. So it's something that you really have to think about. And scholarships require a certain GPA. So what is going to be your standard in that regard? So you guys are going to get a chance to talk about, you know, some of that. And then you're also going to get to kind of look at the flip side, because you're talking about what are these qualities that I want in a player I want to recruit. But now you're going to look at what are the qualities of a good coach. Meaning, if you want to become a coach, what are some of the good qualities, or qualities that make coaches successful? And I think, in my experience, the things that I've heard from players and the things that I've experienced myself, a few of the things that I would probably say: consistency for sure. Being consistent in all aspects. Discipline consistently. Plan your practices consistently. Whatever you're doing, make it consistent. The worst thing I feel like athletes don't like is when things are just all over the place and they don't know what to expect and they don't know what's going to happen, or when they feel like people are getting treated unfairly, anything like that. So consistency, I think, is huge. I also think finding a balance, which is really, really hard, but finding a balance between being that disciplinarian that this is how it should be, this is how it's going to be, this is how we're going to do it. There's no question about it. But a balance between that and the player still knowing that you are 100% there for them and will help them in any way that you can. And I think sometimes that's hard because, I've had my assistant coach will come to me and say, those girls are scared of you. And I said, well, if that's what it takes for them to obey the rules and to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do and to make sure that we're getting better as a team, okay. But I also always tried to make sure that they all knew that if there was a problem, if there was an issue, come to me, I'm going to help you. We'll figure it out. And sometimes that's a tough one to balance. But I think, being encouraging, not being too negative all the time, showing positive, being positive, being a good role model in the sense of, if you're preaching certain things, make sure that they're seeing those things in you. I think anytime you can implement psychology, that's great, so understanding personalities and some of the things we're going to talk about later on in the chapter. I think drive and energy and excitement and all of those things, when you see those things in a coach, it shows you they're invested. I think, as much as you can show your investment in that program, the kids respect that at any level. And so from my experience, those would be some of the things. But I know you guys are going to watch some videos and you guys are going to do some discussion about that. And that's something else I'm excited to hear you guys talk about because, I've been out of being a player for a long time and I've coached for a very long time. And so I'm kind of interested to see from you guys' perspective, because most of you are probably still athletes of some sort, how do you feel about some of these qualities of coaches and what do you think are good qualities, and what would you want to implement yourself as a coach? What qualities would you want to show and have stand out? So I hope you guys have fun with that one too.